The mercenary group has taken over one city and has been advancing on Moscow. Yes, they decided to halt their attack.
Good evening, I'm John Yang. It has been a tumultuous day in Russia. Late this afternoon, Wagner mercenary group founder Yevgeny Prigozhin ordered an about-face in his advance on the capital city of Moscow. His forces were on the move earlier today after taking control of Rostov-on-Don, a city near the Ukrainian border that's a Russian military headquarters. Yevgeny Prigozhin said he stopped his forces just hours short of Moscow to save Russian lives. He explained in an audio message.
In the last 24 hours, we have got to within 200 kilometers of Moscow. We didn't spill a single drop of our fighters' blood. Now the moment has come when blood could be spilled. Understanding responsibility for the chance that Russian blood could possibly be spilled on one side, we are turning our columns around.
Earlier, Russian army soldiers and Wagner Group mercenaries had prepared for a clash.
So, did he stop the advance on Moscow because he's worried about killing innocent Russian civilians? Because that may seem like it.
Russians ready to fight Russians. Wagner Group forces had been barreling toward Moscow hours after they had seized Rostov-on-Don. Prigozhin called it retribution for what he claimed were Moscow's attacks on his fighters in Ukraine.
We have taken Rostov's military objects under our control, including an airfield. There are no issues. So when we are told that Wagner has interfered and that something has collapsed on the front lines, we are not the reason for that collapse.
Russian helicopters attacked Wagner vehicles as they headed north through the city of Voronezh. Prigozhin accused the Russians of firing on civilian targets, including a fuel depot, to slow his advance. Russian President Vladimir Putin accused Prigozhin of staging a coup.
We won't allow a repeat of a civil war. What we are facing now is treason. Unreasonable ambitions and personal interest lead to treachery, state treason, and betrayal of one's own people.
In an audio message, Prigozhin said he and his forces were Russia's true defenders.
As for betraying the motherland, the president is deeply mistaken. We are patriots of our motherland. We have fought and we are fighting everyone from the Wagner private military company.
Prigozhin has been a vocal critic of Russia's military leaders, including Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Military Chief of Staff Valery Gerasimov.
We have a 70% shortage of ammunition. Shoigu, Gerasimov, where is the ammunition? Look at them.
As tensions between the two Russian factions escalated, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky posted a taunting tweet. Today, the world saw that the bosses of Russia do not control anything.
No, it's all been an illusion by Putin and his people, and the invasion of Ukraine has broken that illusion.
Late today, the Kremlin said it will drop all criminal charges against Prigozhin and that he will move to Belarus. That country's president, Alexander Lukashenko, brokered the deal that defused the rebellion. Candace Rondo is the senior.
Wait, is the mercenary leader going to follow that? Because if so, that would be hilarious. Like, why?
Director for the Future Frontlines program at the think tank New America. She's writing a book on the Wagner Group. Candace, what was it that Yevgeny Prigozhin wanted, and did he achieve any of it?
Well, he certainly achieved attention-getting. I think he had the attention of the entire world today with his march for justice from Rostov-on-Don up to Moscow, or at least toward Moscow. The demand was apparently an explanation for why Putin and Russia's military leaders were fighting the war so poorly, and why so many men had died on Putin's watch during these last few days as the Wagner Group has pressed forward in Ukraine.
He seemed to be doing so well. I mean, he seemed to have planned this, and it was going so well. Why do you think he stopped? Why do you think what was the pressure on him to stop?
Well, this has been just a nonstop drama from the moment that he made his declaration that apparently Russian forces had attacked a group of Wagner forces near the southern military district area near Ukraine and the border of Rostov-on-Don. And that was some sort of precipitating action. And then we saw him moving north with apparently thousands of troops, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles. I think what he achieved today was insulation from what would have been maybe his inevitable downfall had the Wagner Group been brought under the control of the Ministry of Defense, which was another precipitating cause. Just last week, Sergei Shoigu, the Minister of Defense, called for complete unity of command, and that is for all Wagner Group and volunteer forces to be under the control of the Kremlin, of the Ministry of Defense.
That's hilarious because it seems like the Wagner Group is doing definitely better under the leader Prigozhin compared to like the Russian military. They're they get it's just the Russian military is crap.
And, Prigozhin immediately raised objections to that very loudly. And so this march seems to have been designed to forestall that. And he seems to have once again slipped the noose, so to speak, and moved to Belarus for safety, as for a safe harbor.
Tell us a little bit about who
Wow, so he actually went to Belarus. I mean the dictator there isn't any better.
Yevgeny Prigozhin is, and is taking a high-risk gamble, rolling the dice like he did. Is that characteristic of him?
Absolutely. This is a guy who, as a young man, trained as a cross-country Olympic skier, didn't luck out because of a couple of different things that happened. He had an injury as a young man, turned to a life of crime, spent 10 years behind bars while most of the rest of his contemporaries actually fought on the front lines in the Soviet war in Afghanistan. So he has that in common with Putin. He did not go to the front lines of Russia's biggest war, other than, of course, Chechnya and this war. And when he got out of jail, out of prison, he turned himself around and became a entrepreneur of upscale food restaurants, big bistros in St. Petersburg. He was, of course, often connected with Putin because that was, there are few places at that time in the 1990s in St. Petersburg where you could actually have a good and upscale meal. And
It's funny how he went from criminal to rich business person to murderous mercenary leader. Like, what a wild arc.
and Putin became sort of a patron. But there were other patrons that have been operating in the shadows for Prigozhin for many years that people forget. People close to Putin, like Gennady Timchenko, the head of Volga Group, Sergei Chemizov, the head of Rostec, Russia's largest arms dealer. So that kind of relationship, those sets of relationships, have helped Putin give.
I was actually hoping that the Wagner Group and the Russian military would actually fight each other and weaken each other enough to where the Ukrainian people could win. But this may be another benefit. I mean, they're just hopefully they're moving the entire group to Belarus, and that way, at least the Belarusian government would have to deal with them if they decide to do some kind of armed rebellion.
Prigozhin the path he needs to take the kinds of risks that he did over these last couple of days, as we've seen over the last year and a half.
Prigozhin, as I said, was highly critical of the way this war was being fought. Other critics have been pursued and dealt with, but Putin seemed to allow him to go on. What does this say about his relationship with Putin and then his turn in the last couple of days to seemingly oppose Putin?
Well, it is hard to imagine a situation of this kind unfolding in any other country in the world other than Russia. The only maybe other comparisons, maybe North Korea, but even that seems a bit of a stretch. I think what we saw today was something nobody would have believed. First, Putin threatening to deal brutally with the mutineers who mounted this kind of rebellion, a revolt against his regime, these mercenary fighters. And then suddenly, within 8 hours, there's kind of a turnaround. Doesn't matter. You're all good. Just move next door and wait to see what happens.
It's because Putin knew he couldn't actually defeat the Wagner group, so he found a way to remove the problem temporarily.
I think there is something a little bit strange about this outcome, and I don't think we've seen the last of Mr. Prigozhin. And I don't think for Putin, he comes out of this looking good or smelling like roses.